I never would have imagined that my girlfriend, Willow, would conspire with my second brother, Makoto, to falsely accuse me of being a pervert. The university I had worked so hard to get into was stolen by Makoto, who took my place under my name. Later, the woman I cherished the most, Willow, married Makoto. Our parents' house was given to our youngest brother, Kaito. My job was handed over to our little sister, Maria, and me. I was left behind in a small mountain village, working as a miner. The long hours and harsh conditions ruined my health, and I developed a severe lung disease. By the time I died, there was no one left to even bury me. Makoto, disgusted, sneered at me and said, "Are you kidding? Tuberculosis is contagious." Kaito and Maria chimed in, "You're a criminal. We need to cut all ties with you." Willow, who never cared before, suddenly showed up. She looked at me for the first time in years and said, "George, I wronged you back then, but I can only repay you in our next life." Cough. I couldn't even breathe properly. Blood splattered everywhere as I took my final breath, dying with hatred in a shabby rural clinic. But the next moment, when I opened my eyes, 17-year-old Willow was standing in front of me, acting coy. Chapter 1. George, you're awake. Willow, her hair tied in 2 braids, ran inside excitedly. She grabbed my wrist with a worried look and said, "You passed out in the fields under the sun just now." Makoto suddenly barged in as well, but his eyes went straight to Willow's hand. He quickly pulled Willow behind him, shielding her. Then, he said, "Big brother, if you're awake, hurry up and get back to work. The younger ones are fighting again because no one wants to do more than their share." Even the production team couldn't stop them. Everything was exactly the same as in my past life. I didn't say a word. Could this really be fate giving me another chance? Thinking back to all the misfortunes of my previous life, it was clear there had been warning signs all along. I recalled the cold, ruthless words they said before I died. The bitterness surged up inside me, and I abandoned my usual mild temper. I scolded him. "Makoto, you're only a year younger than me. You couldn't break up their fight, you couldn't carry a little extra weight, and you need to come whining to me over such a trivial matter. Besides, weren't you just pulling and tugging at that female-educated youth? Isn't that considered being a pervert?" I was clearly talking about Makoto, but as soon as the words left my mouth, my throat tightened. In my past life, I was ruined by those very words, pervert. On my deathbed, I had mumbled, "I never did anything to her. I never wanted to cling to any of you. I only wanted to die in my hometown." The phone had long been hung up. No one heard my last words. No one cared about a disgrace like me. I had once been so full of hope. I was the only student in the whole region to get accepted into the prestigious capital university. The village celebrated with drums and firecrackers. My parents slaughtered pigs and hosted a grand feast. But Willow accused me of being a pervert. And from that moment on, I could never turn my life around. Makoto married Willow and climbed the social ladder using his well-connected father-in-law. Then, he looked down on me. I died alone. And it wasn't until days later that my fellow miners discovered my body and buried me in a mass grave. That life had been so unfair. Just thinking about it made my chest tighten with rage. Makoto's voice suddenly snapped me back to reality. The scene before me was still that of the late 1970s. He frowned and asked, "Big brother, what's wrong with you? Why do you keep talking about being a pervert?" Even Willow was confused. She looked at me with teary eyes and said, "Yeah, George, you used to be so kind. Why are you suddenly acting so petty?" I had had enough. I immediately waved my hand and said coldly, "Next. Are you going to tell me that suffering is a blessing? Am I just the seasoning in your little love story? Get out." After saying that, I couldn't be bothered with these 2 traitors anymore. I lay back down, ignoring them completely. Now that I had been given a second chance, I was going to live for myself this time. Why should I always give in just because I was the eldest? We were all human beings experiencing life for the first time. Why should I be the only one to suffer? Chapter 2. Willow pursed her lips and said flatly, "George, there's nothing between us. Don't overthink it." I replied coldly, "I don't need to overthink it. The farther you both stay away from me, the better." Ignoring them, I flipped open the book by my bedside and forced myself to read despite the throbbing headache and nausea. But Makoto wasn't ready to let it go. He accused me. "Brother, what's wrong with you today? You sound like you swallowed gunpowder." But forget that for now. Are you going to take care of our younger siblings or not? "I'm not stepping in to stop their fight. I have to study." I shot back. "Oh, so you need to study, but I don't. Get out. If they manage to beat each other to death, then I'll actually be impressed." Seeing that I wouldn't budge, Makoto let out a huff, stormed out, and slammed the door shut with enough force to shake the walls. His displeasure was obvious. Willow, on the other hand, lingered by the window, sneaking glances outside but refusing to leave. Instead, tears welled up in her eyes. She sobbed, "George, I thought you understood my feelings. The way you're treating me today, it really hurts." Her words jolted a memory from my past life. Willow had once said she would repay me in our next life. How? By marrying me. The thought sent a chill down my spine, and I immediately shut her down. Don't. Let's just mind our own business. The college entrance exam is coming up soon. I don't have time for any distractions. Anyone would feel embarrassed after being rejected multiple times. Willow bit her lip, tears still in her eyes, and ran off with a soft sob. The next moment, I heard a familiar voice outside. Oh my, what's wrong, sweetheart? My mother stopped Willow at the door. Don't leave. Willow, who bullied you? Tell me, and I'll make sure they pay. Then she stepped into my room, her face dark with disapproval. What's wrong with you? Lazing around in bed wasn't enough. Now you had to make Willow cry too. I froze, staring at her for several seconds. She looked nothing like the old, cold woman from the faded funeral portrait in my past life. It had been so many years since I had seen her looking this young and full of life. Mom. I rushed forward and hugged her, tears streaming down my face. I had endured so much in my past life, but my mother had never been there to comfort me. Now, for the first time in years, I finally felt like a child again, but she pushed me away and, smack. A sharp slap landed across my face, its echo ringing in my ears. She scolded me. Do you even realize what's going on? Your father is working in the factory, which makes you the pillar of this family. Your younger siblings are fighting, and you do nothing. Now, you've even upset Willow. You've really disappointed me. Her words completely sobered me up. It hit me, whether in my past life or this one, I had never truly received a mother's love. I asked bitterly, Mom, am I not your child too? We all came from the same womb. So why is it always me who has to sacrifice everything? She pointed a trembling finger at me, furious. You don't look sick at all. You have plenty of energy to argue back at me. Makoto quickly rushed to support her, patting her back as if to calm her. Of course, he didn't forget to throw fuel on the fire. Mom, don't be upset. Big brother is getting more selfish by the day. If he keeps slacking off, how will our family earn enough work points? What will we eat and drink? I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. So, by your logic, if I leave for college and leave you, this useless waste, behind, Mom, Kaito, and Maria will all starve to death. In my past life, I had stayed in this village, working hard and taking care of our parents until their final days. Yet my younger siblings only visited once a year, and my parents constantly praised them, while for me, they had nothing but disdain. Mom glared at me, her voice full of anger. College, you're the eldest. If you leave, how will this family survive? Makoto and Willow will go to the city for school. They'll support you. You just stay put and behave. Without my permission, you are not allowed to leave this village. A weight crushed my chest. I could still feel the pain of my diseased lungs from my previous life, the agony of dying in that clinic, abandoned. Of course, Mom had always been biased. In my past life, I was too ashamed after being branded a criminal to fight back. I had never challenged anything, but now that I had been reborn, I finally saw the truth. From the very beginning, I was the outsider in this family. Gritting my teeth, I sneered. Support me? That's a load of crap. Mom, you already planned for them to get married, didn't you? Chapter 3. My mother's eyes flickered for a moment, and then, clearly flustered, she blushed and said, What nonsense are you talking about? I never meant that. Who Willow likes is her own choice. How could I possibly play matchmaker? I no longer had any romantic feelings for Willow, but I wanted to know what she was really thinking. So, I asked bluntly, Willow, let's clear this up today. Just say it. Who do you like? The room fell into dead silence. In this era, discussing romance openly was almost unheard of. Willow bit her lip and hesitated. Actually, her face turned bright red as she stammered, her eyes darting between me and Makoto, but I didn't give her any room to maneuver. Coldly, I sneered. Heh, you just don't want to offend either of us, right? Whoever has a brighter future is the one you'll marry, isn't that it? Well then, let me make the decision for you. I'm taking myself out of the equation. I don't like you at all. My words were sharp and final, leaving Willow with no way to save face. She covered her face and bolted out of the house. Before leaving, she snapped, Don't flatter yourself. I'm an educated youth in the countryside with a bright future ahead of me. Why would I ever like a country bumpkin like you? Good grief. My mother clutched her thigh and wailed, throwing herself onto the floor. How did I give birth to such a heartless brute? You only think about yourself and never about your family. Husband, come back soon, or I'll die from the disgrace. But I had long since stopped falling for these theatrics. Without a word, I turned around, stepped inside my room, and locked the door behind me. The moment the lock clicked, my mother's sobs cut off abruptly. Instead, the commotion had attracted plenty of nosy villagers who were peering curiously into our yard. Makoto scowled and hissed, Mom, do you have to make an even bigger fool of yourself? Just go break up the fight in the fields already. You're giving everyone a free show. At the sight of her beloved second son losing his patience, my mother had no choice but to scramble to her feet, dust herself off, and rush to the fields. Finally, the house was quiet again, and I could focus on my studies. At least today's mess had completely severed any lingering ties with Willow. That meant no future trouble. This lifetime, I would go to university. I would escape from this family of leeches and never look back. Just then, Mao, the village secretary, strode toward my door. When I opened it, he greeted me with a warm smile. I heard you got heat stroke, so I brought you some medicine. Didn't expect you to be studying so diligently even while sick. Look at you, your face is pale as a sheet. You must remember, health is the foundation of revolution. Even an outsider could tell I wasn't in good shape. Yet my own mother and brother treated me as if I were just a plow ox meant to toil endlessly in the fields. Secretary Mao always said I was a bright student and often gave me books, placing great hope in me. I had always been grateful to him, but in my past life, after being labeled a pervert, I never had the courage to face him again. I straightened up and said firmly, "Thank you, Secretary Mao. I will do my best to pass the college entrance exam and bring honor to our village." My words struck a chord with him, and he patted my shoulder, visibly moved. That's the right attitude, sacrificing a little for the greater good. Your brothers are grown now, they shouldn't be holding you back. The pre-exam selection is coming up soon, so push yourself and make us proud. Secretary Mao was a wise man. He could see my struggles. Before leaving, he even took the time to encourage me. I had to pass that selection. No way was I going to repeat my past mistakes. Still, my mother was my mother. So the next morning, I resumed my work in the fields. But this time, I stopped covering for the others. If my siblings slacked off, I wouldn't earn their work points for them. At noon, the whole family gathered for lunch, sitting together with forced smiles. The moment I stepped inside, however, their expressions turned cold. My mother hadn't even saved me a proper meal, just a single, rock-hard cornbread bun. So this was what happened when you stopped being a pushover. Suddenly, you weren't just selfish, you were a threat to the entire family's well-being. I didn't argue. I simply took the bun and started heading toward my room, intending to eat while reading. But the moment I pushed open the door, Willow, she was sitting on my bed, flipping through my books. Holy crap, I yelped, instinctively backing up against the doorway. A surge of unease rushed through me. My mind flashed back to my past life, when Willow's accusations had ruined me. What if she falsely accused me again? What if she screamed that I was harassing her? I didn't even dare to step inside. Seeing my panic, Willow smiled sweetly and said, "George, I brought you an ice pop. Don't be shy, come in." She beamed at me, standing by my bed, waving me over, like a devil whispering in my ear. Chapter 4. I don't want it. I refused outright, my voice trembling slightly. Pointing to the door, I snapped, "Take it away right now. Save your little gestures for Makoto. Weren't you two flirting quite happily in the fields today? I would never let myself fall into the same trap again. If Makoto wanted her, he could have her. I had no interest in someone as fickle as her." No wonder the whole family was looking at me with such contempt earlier. It turned out that Willow had been in my room, and they were all just waiting for an excuse to turn against me. Willow frowned and said, "George, are you seriously this jealous? I live in your house, I'm just being considerate. I was just talking to him about wheat in the fields. Then, I thought of buying you an ice pop to help cool you down. After everything you said to me yesterday, I didn't even hold a grudge against you, and yet you're still treating me like this. I despise this kind of behavior, eating from one bowl while staring at another." She was always looking for the best deal, always calculating, a female educated youth, yet she schemed like this. I said bluntly, "I told you, I don't need your kindness. Save it." Pointing at the doorway, I hardened my tone. "From now on, don't step into my room again. A single man and a single woman alone in a room. My reputation is already bad enough." Willow ran out crying again. This time, I had made my stance so clear that I didn't believe she would dare cling to me any longer. But to her, my reaction only confirmed one thing: I was jealous of Makoto. Otherwise, how would I have noticed who she was talking to in the fields? Rumors had been circulating recently, saying that Willow was nothing short of a temptress. She had supposedly turned the two Wang brothers against each other, making them lose focus on farming, obsessed instead with winning her over. Whoever got into university first would earn the right to marry her. In a small village like ours, such gossip was poison. Worse, it could even affect the party's assessment of her. Willow became increasingly dejected, walking around listlessly, unable to focus on her work. One day, under the scorching sun, after I had finished my work and sat down to read, Makoto suddenly picked a fight. "Big brother, we need to talk. I think it's really unfair for you to push a female comrade into the spotlight like this." I didn't even look up as I flipped a page. Who started the rumors? We both know the answer to that. Since I had stopped picking up the slack for the family, Makoto had been forced to take on more work. That, of course, made him resentful. To vent his frustrations, He had instigated Wang's younger sister to spread rumors about Willow. Now, in the villagers' eyes, Makoto was the hard-working one, while I was selfish, only caring about my books. I smirked. You can't outmatch me in studying, and you're not smart enough to compete fairly. So, what else can you do but play dirty? Makoto didn't get angry. Instead, he spoke as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Big brother, just step aside. I have to get into university and marry Willow. Besides, she told me she likes me. You were never going to win against me anyway. I finally paused and looked straight at him. Willow is yours. I only want to go to university. Whether or not you get in has nothing to do with me. If you're incapable, stop expecting others to step aside for you. Makoto could no longer contain his anger. He lunged forward, grabbed my book, and hurled it. With a wet splat, the book landed right in a pile of cow dung, completely ruined. My face darkened with fury. That book was a rare study material that Secretary Mao had gone out of his way to bring me. The problems in it were ones I had never even seen before. And now, thanks to Makoto, it was gone. I grabbed him by the collar. With a sharp tearing sound, his cotton shirt ripped, stuffing his mouth with clumps of cotton fibers. Grinding my teeth, I spat. Do I owe you all something? Did Mom and Dad have me just to be your servant? If we weren't blood related, I'd beat you into the dirt today. Makoto, the sight of us grappling with each other stood out, especially during break time. Willow, who had been watching us closely, immediately rushed over with the rest of the production team. A loud voice shouted, "Break it up, now." Chapter 5. It was only then that I realized I had fallen into another trap. How ridiculous. Makoto had been scheming step by step just to stop me from taking the college entrance exam. The brigade leader jabbed a finger at me and barked, "George, what the hell are you doing? Fighting your own brother over a woman? Put Makoto down this instant. You've completely embarrassed our entire team." The past few days, rumors had been flying that Makoto and I were fighting over Willow. Naturally, the brigade leader assumed this was another petty quarrel over a woman, but I remained calm. Pointing at the pile of cow dung, I said clearly, "He threw my book in there." As his older brother, I'm just teaching him a lesson. What's wrong with that? Before the brigade leader could respond, Willow jumped in. "You've been dumping all your work on Makoto lately. His hands are covered in blisters. He's been too exhausted to study." Of course, he'd be upset. "And even if you get into college, I still wouldn't like you." I couldn't help but laugh. "I've already made it crystal clear, but it's like you're deaf. Who said I was going to college for you? You heard a couple of rumors and convinced yourself they were true. Stop being so self-absorbed. Even if I stay single my whole life, I'd never marry you." I let go of Makoto, then held up my hands for everyone to see. "Look at this. Calluses over calluses. Blisters over blisters. I've been cleaning up after my younger siblings for 10 whole years. He does it for 2 days, and suddenly, everyone pities him." My hands were a mess, raw, cracked, and covered in scars, but these people were blind to it. The brigade leader slapped my hands away and snapped, "You still think you're in the right? Every eldest son carries this burden." I shot back, "So being the eldest means I should just drop dead?" Silence. No one had a response. Willow had no choice but to help Makoto away. As she left, she glared at me and said, "You've really disappointed me." Good. The more disappointed, the better. Maybe now she'd finally leave me alone. A few days later, it was time for the college entrance exam pre-selection. I walked out of the test room feeling confident. Excitement bubbled inside me. I was finally going to escape this black hole of a family. But just like in my past life, I ran into trouble. A group of bandits blocked my path. "Hey, buddy, got any money? Lend me some," one of them said. I inhaled sharply. The guy had a knife. I didn't dare make any sudden moves. "Big brother, I really don't have anything. I'm as broke as they come." The bandit eyed my empty pockets with disdain, spat on the ground, and waved me off. TCH, get lost. In my past life, I had let it slide, but in this life, I was younger, stronger, and no longer willing to put up with nonsense. So I pretended to leave, then suddenly spun around and slammed an elbow into the guy's ribs. He doubled over, wheezing. "Ow. Stop. Don't hit me." I had no choice. My mother's starving to death, and I had nowhere else to turn. I didn't let go, still gripping his arm tightly. "How do I know you're not lying?" He led me to a nearby tree, where an old woman lay slumped against the trunk, one leg crippled, barely clinging to life. A pang of sadness hit me. I thought back to my past life, how I had died alone, abandoned, with no one to help me. Without hesitation, I pulled out all my food and ration tickets. "Feed your mother first. You're young and able. Find honest work." The bandit dropped to his knees, banging his head against the ground. "Big brother, from now on, you're my blood brother. I'll go wherever you tell me to, east or west. If you tell me to kill a dog, I won't even chase a chicken." I waved him off. Enough with the smooth talk. Just live your life right, and that'll be thanks enough. Days later, my exam permit arrived. Perfect. I was sure I could still get into Capital University. On the morning of the exam, Something rare happened. My mother actually woke up early and boiled an egg for each of us. A while later, she appeared at my door. George. She didn't dare step inside. Ever since I had been reborn, I had never given this family a warm look. Now, they wanted to talk, but none of them dared to be the first to speak. Instead, they kept exchanging glances, hoping someone else would do the dirty work. Despite everything, I couldn't quite harden my heart completely. I sighed and walked over to support my mother. What is it, Mom? She pulled out a small embroidered sachet, delicately woven with tassels. I sewed this myself as a blessing charm. I hope you pass the exam and get into a good university. Looking at her serious expression, I couldn't deny it. I was touched. 2 lifetimes, and I had finally received a sliver of motherly affection. I happily accepted it, hanging it around my neck. It's beautiful. Thank you for thinking of me, Mom. I won't let you down. I'll bring honor to our Wang family. The moment the words left my mouth, her smile froze. She glanced at the dining table, but the others all kept their heads down, pretending to be busy. Finally, she stammered, George, I have a favor to ask. For today's exam, could you switch names with Makoto? He's been exhausted from farm work lately. He really doesn't have the strength. If he takes the test, he might fail. Chapter 6. My face turned deathly pale, and I almost lost my balance. I frowned. Mom, are you seriously being this blatantly biased toward your second son? Am I even your real child? She scoffed. What kind of nonsense are you saying? A mother's love is equal for all her children. You were my firstborn, of course. I can't bear to see you leave my side. But Makoto, he's so thin and frail. What could he possibly do if he stayed in the village? Might as well send him far away, so I don't have to look at him. Then, you and I can stay home and live peacefully together. Wouldn't that be nice? She put on an affectionate front with me while pretending to dislike Makoto, but that only made my heart ache even more. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I had to tilt my head up toward the ceiling to stop them from falling. I said, Fine, Mom. Willow can have your precious second son. I only ask for the right to take the college exam. I won't ask you for a single penny for tuition or living expenses. Is that fair? She clicked her tongue in annoyance, then yanked the charm sachet from my neck and shrieked, If you both leave for the city, are you trying to drive me to my grave? Then, she threw herself onto the ground, wailing and rolling around like a madwoman. She slapped her thighs and screamed at the top of her lungs, blocking the doorway so I couldn't leave. This ungrateful son of mine. I raised him all these years for nothing. Hearing the commotion, Willow hurried over and helped my mother up, her tone full of blame. George, what if you make Auntie sick from all this stress? We're all family. Does it really matter who goes to university? You're only thinking about yourself. Don't you have any sense of sacrifice? I felt my anger rise to a boiling point as I listened to their twisted logic. I sneered. Oh, and what gives you the right to speak on this? Willow, if you think it's so easy to sacrifice for others, why don't you switch names with Makoto instead? Give your college spot to him. You two will be married in the future anyway, right? Who takes the exam doesn't matter, as long as your future husband is the one getting the degree. That'd be even better for your reputation. Willow's face turned beet red with anger. She stomped her foot. Why you? Don't talk nonsense. Who said I was marrying Makoto? George, you've really broken my heart. Do you even know what the village is saying about me? I'm an unmarried woman who's going to take responsibility for my ruined reputation. Even now, she refused to make her stance clear. She wanted to keep both of us hanging. Calling her a temptress wasn't even an exaggeration. I replied indifferently. Willow, whatever rumors are flying around the village have nothing to do with me. If you want someone to take responsibility, find someone else. I don't like you in the slightest. Even if you were the last woman on earth, I wouldn't spare you a glance. Willow froze. She had been called out so harshly, so bluntly, that she could hardly believe it. She had assumed I would always be at her beck and call. But now, I truly didn't want her anymore. Her face darkened. If I refused to marry her, she'd have no choice but to settle for Makoto. But Makoto was a nobody. If he didn't even get into university, what kind of future would he have? What was she supposed to do now? At that moment, the brigade leader, the village chief, and Secretary Mao arrived. The brigade leader didn't hesitate. He stormed up and immediately began scolding me. I could hear your mother crying from a mile away. George, you unfilial brat, and you think you're worthy of taking the National College entrance exam? The village chief crossed his arms and chimed in. That's right. With your disgraceful conduct, even if you pass the exam, we won't recommend you to the organization. I wasn't going to take this lying down. I snapped back. We live in a time where results speak for themselves. In the past, I let myself be shackled by blind filial piety. I sacrificed everything, and not a single person spoke up for me. Now that I'm finally standing up for myself, all of you suddenly have something to say. Tell me, who in the Wang family has been more dutiful than me? Silence fell over the group. No one had an answer. Seeing me repeatedly argue back, the brigade leader grew enraged. He made a snap decision. Fine, then you won't be leaving the village today. Let's see how you take the exam now. Then, he turned to the village chief. Village chief, send Makoto and Willow instead, and get 10 strong men to guard the village entrance. I want to see how George plans on sneaking out. At these words, my mother and Willow both froze. My mother jumped up, dusted herself off, and suddenly forgot all about her supposed injuries. Wait, no need to go that far, she hurriedly said, a nervous chuckle escaping her lips. Brigade leader, if George doesn't go, our family won't have a college student at all. Willow, too, was panicked. She had just wanted me to swap names with Makoto. She had never meant to stop me from taking the test entirely. She pleaded, that's right. Auntie Wong only wanted George to swap names with Makoto, not to ban him from taking the test. Desperate to defend themselves, they blurted out everything, and just like that, they exposed their own plan. The brigade leader narrowed his bloodshot eyes. So, what's the truth here? You want a college student in the family, but you don't want George to be the one to go. You just want all the benefits for yourselves. The village chief finally realized what was going on. His expression darkened. You were planning to cheat on the exam. That's deception. It's a crime. Wang Daiseo, you've really lost your mind. And Willow, so much for being an educated youth. Your so-called awareness is pathetic. He shook his head in disappointment, then turned to the brigade leader and announced firmly, that's it. None of them are taking the test. If this is how they behave, they're unfit for higher education. Chapter 7. The situation remained tense. The brigade leader had already made his decision, and taking back his words now would be difficult. Finally, Secretary Mao stepped forward, his voice steady and calm. I don't see why this has to be so complicated. All 3 of them passed the pre-selection for the college entrance exam, which means they are eligible to take the test. Whoever has the ability to pass will bring honor to our village. Collective glory is more important than personal disputes. Hurry up and hitch the ox cart to take them to the station. If we delay any longer, they'll miss it for real. Hearing his words, my eyes burned with emotion. I hadn't cowered when everyone was against me, but now that someone was actually standing up for fairness, I felt a lump rise in my throat. The brigade leader and the village chief, given a way to back down without losing face, decided not to block me any longer. Instead, they personally escorted us to the station. My mother still wanted to say something. Her expression was reluctant, clearly still hoping to convince me to switch names with Makoto, but I didn't even glance at her. My eyes were fixed straight ahead, on the open road, the mountains, the rivers, and my future. Yet, even though I had torn everything apart today, I couldn't shake a sense of unease. This lifetime, things had already changed so much. Even if I passed the exam, who was to say they wouldn't try to ruin me again? I knew them too well. They would stop at nothing to achieve their goals. But for now, I would take things one step at a time. No matter what, I had to keep my distance from Willow and Makoto. Unfortunately, things never went as planned. Willow still had to worm her way back in. She came up beside me and said softly, I'm sorry, George. Just now, I only spoke up because I couldn't bear to see Auntie Wong so upset. Don't take it to heart. I smirked and gave her a sidelong glance. There's no need to explain. I don't care what you think. If you have time to waste, why not tutor Makoto instead? If he manages to pass, maybe he'll even be able to marry you. Makoto was standing nearby, watching as the woman who had always been so gentle toward him now desperately tried to cling to me. He couldn't stomach it. He sneered, Big brother, what are you so smug about? Acting like you know you'll pass. I curled my lips into a lazy smile. Not only do I know I'll pass, but I also know you're planning something shady. But you'd better think twice. If I catch you cheating, I'll make sure you end up in a jail cell. Makoto's eyes darkened. Quit slandering me. Makoto, have a clear conscience. Willow quickly pulled him aside, trying to distract him with her textbook. Let's go over this question. Makoto, before turning away, she shot me one last pitiful glance, then lowered her head in an act of dejection. Makoto, of course, fell for it instantly and started comforting her. The exam hall was packed with students. Some looked confident. Others were pale with anxiety. I had no doubt that I would do even better than in my past life. After finishing the exam, I even took a detour into town to buy some treats. I brought crispy rice candy for the villagers and got malted milk for Secretary Mao's child. Meanwhile, Makoto and Willow had spent their time wandering the streets, gawking at everything. They even shared a single bottle of canned sugar water, completely unbothered by how embarrassing it looked. On our way back, we stopped by the factory where my father worked. We waited outside under the scorching sun for a long time before he finally emerged, walking with an air of importance. When he saw us, his face lit up, and he patted both our shoulders proudly. You brats are really something. Both of you took the college entrance exam. How'd it go? I had missed my father, so I spoke warmly. I won't disappoint you. Makoto, on the other hand, stayed silent, simply offering a stiff smile. Then, my father's expression grew serious. George, If you pass, what are your plans? I answered without hesitation. I'll dedicate myself to infrastructure development and serve my country. I was full of ambition. I thought my father was asking out of genuine concern for my future. He nodded approvingly. Good. But then, his tone suddenly shifted. But your second brother isn't as strong as you, and he's not as smart either. If he doesn't have a good wife to support him, what's he going to do with his life? If only you two could share a little. My heart sank into an icy pit. I knew exactly what he was about to say. In my past life, after Willow accused me of being a pervert, my father had said almost the same thing. George, you brought this on yourself. You can't blame anyone else. You're better than Makoto in everything, but now that your political record is tainted, you won't pass the background check. Instead of wasting the college spot, why not give it to Makoto? At least our family will still have a college graduate. It was a situation I had seen before, a so-called fair compromise, but one that had condemned me to a lifetime of injustice. I looked him in the eye and said, Dad, I am me, and he is him. I earned my place fair and square. Why should I share it with him? If I go to university, I'll have a better future. I'll contribute more, not just to our family but to the entire country. Chapter 8. The moment I finished speaking, my father's face darkened. He frowned and scoffed. I already heard from your mother over the phone. You've been acting rebellious and unfilial lately. Looks like she wasn't lying. Then, without warning, he kicked my knee. I nearly collapsed, barely managing to kneel there, my leg trembling in pain. He scolded. Do you even understand a parent's heart? We don't expect either of you to be hugely successful. We just don't want one of you to live a worse life than the other. As the eldest, it's your duty to support your younger siblings. I sucked in a sharp breath, but the pain only made me laugh. Go ahead and beat me to death, I said. I bet you, if I die today, not a single one of your other 3 children will take care of you in your old age. In my past life, I had cared for my parents until their final breath. And yet, my father's dying words had been, Where's Makoto? Where's Maria? You're just an eyesore. Get out of my sight. How ridiculous. The more I sacrificed, the more they took me for granted. My father's rage boiled over. You little bastard. I'll beat you to death. He ripped off his shoe and swung it at my face, but the hit never landed. I looked up and saw Willow clutching his arm, stopping him mid-swing. Uncle, don't. So many people are watching. You can't air family shame in public, she said softly. My father took a deep, angry breath but ultimately lowered his arm. He muttered, At least Willow understands proper etiquette. The encounter ended on a sour note. When we returned to the village, my good mood from earlier was completely ruined. Willow tried to enter my room, saying she wanted to apply medicine to my injuries, but I knew better than to let her get close. Who knew what kind of scheme she might pull? I blocked the door and said firmly, I appreciate the thought, but no need. After shutting the door, I looked down at my swollen knee and let out a bitter chuckle. My father hadn't held back at all. Over the next half a month, my mother, Kaito, and Maria continued to ostracize me. They wouldn't even save me a bowl of hot food. And in the village, people kept whispering behind my back. Then, the university acceptance letters arrived. I had done even better than in my past life. Everything changed. Suddenly, everyone was congratulating me, singing my praises. That day, my father even took a leave of absence from work to personally cook a feast for me. Well, my brat of a son really has made something of himself, the top scorer in the whole city. My mother, teary-eyed, went around bragging to anyone who would listen. Our family's finally seeing good fortune. What a joyous occasion. Even Willow got accepted into a university in the capital. The first thing Willow did after receiving her acceptance letter was run straight to me, beaming as she held it up like a treasure. George, look, I did well too. Our schools aren't far apart. I can visit you all the time, and my mom can take care of us. I was in a good mood, so I just casually hummed in response. But that simple acknowledgement was enough to make her eyes well up with tears. She looked at me with such adoration that she didn't even notice Makoto glaring daggers at us from behind. The villagers insisted I drink with them, and that night, I was high on victory. It was clear to me now, if I could succeed academically, I could change my fate. Before heading back inside, I overheard my mother whispering to my father, Makoto failed the exam. He must be feeling miserable. I hope he doesn't do anything rash. Our family was hosting a celebratory banquet, but Makoto had locked himself in his room, refusing to eat or drink for days. My mother gave me a sideways glance and whined, Look at your poor brother. What's he going to do now? I said flatly, Since when does failing an exam make someone poor? There are plenty of people who don't go to college. Farming suits him just fine. It's better than wasting his life away. In my past life, after being falsely accused as a pervert, my family had been assigned the worst plot of land. I had no choice but to become a miner, and that was what eventually killed me. Hearing my response, my parents exchanged a look. I was too tipsy to read into it. Stumbling into my room, I just wanted to collapse into bed and sleep, but the moment I stepped inside, Someone wrapped their arms around me from behind. A soft, feminine voice whispered, "George. My father says you have the makings of a future official. Our family would be honored to have you marry me. Aren't you happy?" My eyes widened in shock. Instantly, I was sober. I felt my body heat up, blood rushing downward uncontrollably. Chapter 9. I shook my head violently, trying to drive away the overwhelming heat surging through my body. I shoved Willow away and snapped, "Who let you in? What did you put in my drink?" In a rural village like ours, there weren't many fancy drugs, most likely. It was something meant for livestock. Willow calmly locked the door behind her. Her exposed neck was as pale as snow, glowing under the dim light, making my vision blur. She fluttered her lashes seductively and murmured, "George, I just want to prove to you, the only man I've ever loved is you. The city is full of wonderful things. The future belongs to us. Take me tonight, and I'll be yours forever." So it was her. No wonder she had spoken so regretfully in my past life, just before I died. Back then, everyone had believed I was a pervert. Willow was an educated city girl. She had her reputation to maintain, so she played the victim. Then, once my college spot went to Makoto, she had no choice but to go along with her parents' arrangement and marry him. Suppressing my discomfort, I tried to reason with her. "Willow, they sold you out. My parents set this up. If you don't leave now, you'll ruin both of our lives." She scoffed. "I don't believe you." With a determined look, she pulled at her collar and lunged at me again, clutching onto me desperately. "My reputation is already ruined because of you. I have to become your woman tonight." I was so furious that I turned my head away and struggled to break free. I spat. "If Makoto had been the one to top the exam, you'd be throwing yourself at him right now, wouldn't you? You don't want me, you want that diploma." But Willow was completely intoxicated by the moment. This was her first time doing something like this, and her heart was pounding in excitement. She whispered, "George, you can't escape tonight. Your father, your brother, and your sister are all outside, just waiting for us to seal the deal." The moment she said that, an overwhelming sense of powerlessness washed over me. The cruelest betrayal had come from my own family. Even if I was the top scorer, I would still never be their favorite. 2 lifetimes of struggle. Was this just my fate? No, I refused to accept this. Summoning all my strength, I shoved Willow away. Then, grabbing a porcelain bowl from the table, I smashed it onto the ground. Crack! I picked up a shard and pressed it against my palm, dragging it across my skin. One cut, then another. Blood dripped to the floor. I gritted my teeth and growled, "Is this enough? If not, I'll bleed myself dry right here. Will that satisfy you?" Willow gasped in horror. "Why, you're bleeding." She stumbled backward, her face pale. The commotion outside must have alarmed my father because the next moment, the wooden door was kicked open. "What the hell are you doing?" he roared. "Your body was given to you by your parents. Do you think slashing your wrists is being filial?" Blood covered my hands, but I just let out a chilling laugh. "You wanted my blood, didn't you? Here, I'm giving it all to you." I lifted my gaze, burning with rage. "Where's my acceptance letter? Give it to me." "I don't know," my father replied, his face cold and unyielding. He had no intention of handing it over. I turned to my mother, but she avoided my eyes, shrinking behind my father. Her guilt was written all over her face. I let out a hollow laugh. All right. My voice cracked, and I scanned the faces of my younger siblings, the very people I had helped raise. Through gritted teeth, I spat, "You're all fantastic." Then, ignoring my injuries, I stumbled out the door. Willow seemed to have finally realized something was terribly wrong. Her expression cleared, and she hesitated before calling out, "George, I really didn't know." I shot her a look of utter disgust and kept running. I knew what was coming next. I had to stay awake. I couldn't let myself pass out. Panting, I pounded on Mao Secretary's door. Secretary, are you there? Please, help me." The door creaked open, and Mao Secretary emerged, wearing his house robe and slippers. His eyes widened when he saw me. "George, wasn't tonight your celebration banquet? What happened to you?" Without hesitation, he rushed back inside and rummaged for bandages, wrapping my wounds. I clutched his wrist, my voice trembling. "Secretary, no matter what my family says, please, don't believe them. You're the only one I can rely on in this village. I'll never forget your kindness. If I make it big one day, I swear I'll give back to this village." Before he could respond, a loud shout echoed through the village. George ran away after assaulting a woman. He thinks just because he got into Capital University, he can do whatever he wants. Hurry, catch him. Chapter 10. Tears streamed down my face. A grown man. Yet I was being forced to endure such humiliation. The drug in my system had weakened due to the blood loss, but my head was still throbbing, and my wounds were still bleeding as I ran. I sprinted forward, but my body felt heavier and heavier, until, finally, everything went black. It was over. I was still going to be branded a pervert, still going to be ruined, still going to be a worthless, forgotten man, But then, someone pinched the pressure point under my nose. Wong, big brother, what happened to you? It was David, the small-time bandit I had met after the pre-exam selection. I had given his starving mother some food, and he had sworn to treat me as his lifelong brother. With the last bit of strength I had, I grabbed his hand. Take me away, please. All right. David didn't ask any questions. Without hesitation, he hoisted me onto his back and ran. But in the distance, I could hear Willow's voice. She was screaming hysterically. George was right. You, as parents, really did set him up like this. He never assaulted me. Stop spreading lies. Nothing happened between us. George is a man of integrity, and I will wait for him to return. David hesitated. Even he was moved by her outburst. Big brother, he said, slowing down. Should we still run? That girl seems to really care about you. No, I answered firmly. She's saying this for her own future, not for me. I had never felt so clear-headed. David supported me as we disappeared into the tall grass. On the way, I asked, "What are you doing here?" He grinned. "I heard the top scorer this year was a guy named George, so I came to congratulate you." Then, he pulled out a small paper-wrapped package, tied neatly with cotton string. "I made some peanut brittle for you myself. Don't look down on it." I took a trembling hand and picked up a piece, biting into the sweetness. A stranger I had only met once was genuinely happy for me. While my own family had tried to destroy my future, I didn't want to dwell on it anymore. Severing ties with them wasn't such a big deal. I asked, "Do you have work right now?" David scratched his head. "Yeah, I do. I sneak goods from the city and resell them in the village." Smuggling was considered illegal in this era. David looked a little embarrassed, waiting for my judgment, but I simply said, "As long as you're earning an honest living with your own hands, you're doing fine." I had finally calmed down enough to make conversation. David's eyes welled up with emotion. "My mother passed away a few days ago. George, from now on, we're real brothers." I clapped him on the back and said, "Good brother, let me join you in the business. Deal." David grinned from ear to ear. 1 month later, as we made our way to Capital University, I told the registrar, "Sir, my admission letter was lost. My name is George. Could you check if I can still be enrolled?" The staff member immediately recognized my name. "Oh, the top scorer from South City." I hadn't expected to meet a fellow townsman. I nodded eagerly. "Yes, that's me." He double-checked my identification photo and, after confirming it was me, said, "Wait here. I'll report to the administration." Time passed slowly. The setting sun painted the campus in a golden hue, making it look even more beautiful than I had imagined. I longed to be part of this place. Finally, just as dusk was falling, the administrator returned. My heart pounded. His brows furrowed. "George, there was a problem with your background check." I felt the blood drain from my body. My lips went pale. I braced myself for the worst, but then, the men continued. "However, the leadership contacted your village's secretary Mao. He vouched for your integrity and insisted that you're an outstanding young man. Congratulations, George. Welcome to Capital University." Before I could even react, David let out a triumphant cheer and lifted me into the air. Yes, George finally made it into university. Meanwhile, back in Wangjia village, Makoto, "Hurry and get ready for school. Here's your admission letter, don't lose it." Mother Wang smiled as she handed him the forged acceptance letter. "Don't worry," she assured him. "You and your brother look similar enough. Just tell them your name is George." Makoto hugged his mother tightly, overjoyed. "Mom, you're the best." Mother Wang beamed. "Well, of course, who else would I be good to if not you? As for that unfilial brat George, he's got a bad reputation in the village, and without an acceptance letter, he'll have no choice but to come crawling back and farm the land." Chapter 11. Makoto frowned, still uneasy. "But Secretary Mao stood up for my brother that day, and Willow keeps saying he didn't assault her. If she ever exposes the fact that we drugged him." Father Wang clapped him on the shoulder, his expression full of disappointment. "Bury that thought deep in your gut and never mention it again. What are you afraid of? Willow is just a woman. How could she ever dare to speak about livestock drugs? Besides, you are the one going to Capital University now. Do you really think she won't come around? I say it was a blessing from the heavens that she didn't end up in your brother's bed that night. A high-ranking official's daughter, she should be your wife." Today was the day Willow and Makoto were heading to the city. Since only George and Willow had been accepted into university from the village, they were meant to travel together. As the Wang family chatted and laughed, Willow approached them, looking pale and distracted. Makoto's face lit up as he reached for her hand. "Willow, let's go report to school together." Not only did he grab her hand, but he also took the opportunity to stroke it a few times. Willow flung his hand off with an expression of disgust. "Don't touch me." Lately, she had been avoiding the Wang household as much as possible, dreading the idea that they might still be scheming to tie her to Makoto. If it weren't for the fact that traveling to the capital alone as a woman was dangerous, she wouldn't have agreed to go with him. Since George's disappearance, there had been no news of him. If he was truly dead, then wouldn't she be responsible for a life? Throughout the journey, Makoto did everything he could to take care of her. Willow, do you want some peach preserves? He opened a can, offering to share it with her. In the past, when she had been keeping her options open, she hadn't minded drinking from the same can as Makoto. That was something Mother Lu had taught her, never offend a man, so that when one succeeded, she could seamlessly choose the best option. But now, just the sight of it made her nauseous. With a swipe of her hand, she knocked the can onto the ground. The glass shattered, and the syrup splattered all over Makoto's clothes. Seeing the smug satisfaction on his face, Willow grew even more resentful. She snapped, Makoto, your brother has been missing for days, and here you are, stealing his spot in university like nothing happened. How can you still eat and drink like this? Makoto, his clothes now sticky and soaked with syrup, pursed his lips and muttered, you look down on me, don't you? You've always liked my brother better, haven't you? Yeah, I get it. I'm worthless compared to him. I should have just stayed in the village farming like the useless peasant I am. After being praised by the Wang family all morning, the last thing he wanted was to get a cold shoulder from the girl he liked. He didn't bother indulging her temper anymore. Instead, he turned away, sulking. Seeing that Makoto was genuinely upset, Willow stopped pushing. She sighed. That's not what I meant. Don't take it the wrong way. For now, she decided to follow him to Capital University. If Makoto really managed to blend in and study there, then perhaps she could still consider him. When they reached the university entrance, Makoto eagerly pulled out his admission letter. Like a precious treasure, he handed it over to the registrar. Hello, sir, I'm George. This is my admission letter. The staff member arched an eyebrow and gave him a once-over. Then, crossing his arms, he asked coolly, George already checked in 3 days ago. I personally brought him inside. So, who are you? Makoto's face stiffened. His mind raced. Since he had already been exposed, he decided to do what his mother had always taught him, make a scene and act like the real victim. He raised his voice. That's impossible. I have the official admission letter. He's the imposter. Why should he be allowed to enroll without a letter while I get rejected? Turning to Willow, he urged, Willow, say something. Why should Capital University accept a fraud just because he showed up first? But Willow wasn't paying attention to him anymore. Her previously lifeless eyes had suddenly lit up with excitement. George was alive. And he had actually made it into university. Willow turned to the staff member eagerly. Really? Then please, call George out so we can confront him directly. Makoto's face twisted in frustration. He shot her a sharp look, signaling her to shut up, but Willow ignored him entirely. Makoto grew anxious. What's the point of a confrontation? He said quickly. I have nothing to say to some fraud. Damn it. Why was Willow acting like this? If she insisted on facing George, then he'd be completely exposed. Chapter 12. Willow refused to let go of the admissions officer's sleeve, standing her ground like a warrior before battle. Hurry up, sir, call him out. Let's see who the real George is. She had already planned everything in her mind. The moment she saw George, she would expose Makoto's lies in front of everyone. That way, George would surely forgive her. They could still go back to how things were. The admissions officer, utterly exasperated, had no choice but to comply. He disappeared inside and didn't return for nearly 2 hours. When he finally emerged, he announced loud and clear. After thorough verification, George is indeed who he claims to be. As for you, you're his younger brother, Makoto, correct? Trying to steal your own brother's university admission. What kind of person does something so shameless? A crowd had gathered by now. All of them were students who had earned their spots fair and square, and they had nothing but contempt for someone trying to cheat their way in. Makoto was humiliated beyond belief. In a fit of rage, he kicked the base of the wall, only to yelp in pain when he stubbed his toe. His face turned purple, but he didn't dare make a sound. A pathetic excuse for a man. Still, he clenched his teeth and cursed. What's so great about him? He abandoned his family just to get into university. And this is the kind of selfish person Capital University accepts. George, come out here, if you have any guts. Face me and explain why you're such a heartless bastard. The admissions officer shot him a warning glare. Enough. Student, I suggest you stop causing trouble. But Makoto, fueled by desperation, threw his bag to the ground and shouted. Why should I stop? George is a pervert. He almost raped Willow, and he knows it. You're protecting a criminal. Capital University is sheltering a rapist. Where's the justice in that? Smack. A loud slap rang through the air. Willow had struck Makoto across the face, shocking the entire crowd. She had never expected him to shout out that incident in front of so many people. Her voice trembled with anger. What the hell are you saying? You're making things up. George and I never had anything like that happen. Makoto's cheek burned bright red, and his breath came in ragged gasps. You hit me. His eyes burned with fury. I was speaking up for you. And yet you're still defending him. Willow bit her lip. She had no way to explain the truth. How could she possibly admit that the real culprit was livestock drugs? She would rather die of shame. Suddenly, the admissions officer stepped in front of her like a shield. Don't be afraid, Miss Willow. We at Capital University are already aware of the situation. Both you and George are innocent. We have already reported this to the authorities. The police will handle this matter. Capital University wasn't far from the police station. Within 30 minutes, officers arrived and immediately grabbed Makoto, slapping a pair of handcuffs onto his wrists. A policeman scoffed. You little punk, already causing trouble at your age. You're coming with us. Makoto struggled. Why are you arresting me? If anyone should be arrested, it's George. He's the real criminal. But no one listened to his frantic shouts. He was dragged away, still cursing and thrashing. The crowd slowly dispersed, murmuring amongst themselves, but Willow remained, staring at the entrance of the university. The admissions officer noticed her hesitation. Do you still need something? He asked. She hesitated, then finally spoke. Sir, what was George's reaction when he heard I was here? At that, the officer let out a disdainful chuckle. So you're Willow? He shook his head. He already guessed you'd come. His exact words were, the clever outsmart themselves. There's always a mountain higher than the last. She should learn her lesson and move on. Willow's heart plummeted. She had truly lost him. When George had liked her, he would save his white bread buns for her, trade his eggs just to buy her a fresh flower to wear. And how had she repaid him? She had noticed that the Wong family didn't favor George, that Makoto was the one they all propped up. So she played her game, balancing between both brothers. She wanted George's talent but feared that Makoto was the only one with a real chance of leaving the countryside. In the end, Wong's mother had used her own desire for status against her, ruining her reputation and severing all her paths forward. She had thought she was so smart, but who was the real fool? One thing was certain, she would never return to that village. As long as Makoto didn't drag her down, she could still start fresh. No one here knew her disgraceful past. She was so close to George. If she stayed near him, they would surely meet again. Besides, her family had deep connections in the city. George was just a poor boy from a rural village. How could he possibly not be tempted by the kind of future she could offer him? Yet before she could act on that plan, she was yanked back to reality by the sharp sting of a belt striking her skin. Her father, Lou, stood over her, his face twisted in rage. Willow, look at the mess you've made. That damned Makoto got himself thrown in jail, and now the police are questioning me because of you. The belt came down again, striking across her arm. Willow yelped in pain. I'll beat some sense into you, Lou fumed. What kind of girl drugs a man? Where the hell is your shame? Chapter 13. Willow was completely dumbfounded. How did her father find out? What nonsense had Makoto been spouting in that prison cell? The brutal beating that followed left her bedridden for nearly a week. By the time she could finally get up, the semester had already started, and she hadn't even attended a single class. Willow, have some porridge. You must be exhausted after spending so much time in the countryside. It pains me to see you like this. Lou's mother entered the room, carrying a tray with a warm meal, but Willow turned away, resentment written all over her face. I don't need your pity. Everything that's happened to me is your fault. She spat. If not for you, George and I would have been a perfect couple. How could I have ended up like this? Lou's mother covered her mouth, sobbing uncontrollably, clearly regretting her past actions. Yes, she had been selfish. She had taught her daughter to manipulate men, keeping both brothers on a leash, waiting to see which one had the brighter future. But back then, there had been no other choice. Lou's father had been watching her every move, and there was no way he would have allowed Willow to do anything else. Sending her to the countryside had been their only option. Returning home had only ever been possible through one route, passing the college entrance exam. And once she had, she was supposed to marry someone of an acceptable background. A factory worker or a peasant simply wouldn't do. That was why they had resorted to such extreme measures. Lou's mother wiped her tears and said, Don't worry, Willow. Your father may be harsh, but he won't abandon you. We owe George an apology, but your father has connections. If we can pull the right strings, we can get him a government job. Once he sees how much we can do for him, he'll have to forgive you. At that, Willow's eyes lit up with hope. Really? Lou's mother nodded. Yes, as long as you insist that you had nothing to do with the incident with Makoto, everything will be fine. Meanwhile, in the prison cell, Makoto had already gone through several rounds of late-night interrogations, but he kept shouting the same thing over and over. My brother is a rapist. Why aren't you arresting him? One of the officers slammed his palm against the table. Then show us the evidence. Produce a witness. Otherwise, this is slander, and we'll add defamation to your charges. Makoto desperately grabbed onto the last name he could think of. Willow from C University. She'll testify for me. For the first time, he looked hopeful, convinced that Willow would take his side, but the officer just frowned and shook his head. You really don't know when to quit. That young lady has already stated there was no such incident. Makoto's face twisted in horror. In this foreign city, he had no one, no family, no friends, only his estranged older brother. Days passed. He was starving, exhausted, and finally, one night, he broke. He admitted it. His voice was barely above a whisper when he confessed. My parents. They gave him livestock heat medicine. The dosage was heavy. There's no way he didn't do something to Willow. The officers gritted their teeth in disgust. One of them slammed his fist onto the table. You drugged your own brother. Do you have any idea how illegal that is? Makoto, your parents aren't even 60 yet. They'll be facing prison time, too. Makoto's face went pale as a sheet. No. If my parents find out I was the one who talked, they'll kill me. The officer crossed his arms. If George chooses to forgive you, you might still have a chance. He's your brother. Did you ever stop to think about that when you were scheming against him? Makoto, realizing the gravity of the situation, burst into tears. I'll apologize. Okay, just let me go home. He spent 2 days crying and waiting for George or Willow to come and bail him out, but instead, an officer returned with a single sheet of paper and slammed it down in front of him. This is Capital University's official statement. They have the right to protect their students and will not accept any form of apology. And as for Miss Willow, her father is a city official. I'm sure you know what that means. Makoto collapsed to the floor. His body shook violently as he lost control of his bladder. Mom. I want my mom, he wailed. Back in Wangjia village, the entire Wang family dropped everything and rushed to the city. The moment Wang mother laid eyes on her son, now thin and sickly, her heart shattered. My baby, you left home to go to university, and now you're in prison, she wailed. This ungrateful beast of an older brother. He might as well throw me in jail, too. The officers had no patience for her nonsense. They issued another summons, and this time, I was called in. My mother sat cross-legged at the entrance of the police station, refusing to move. There was no way to drag her away, so I had no choice but to deal with her myself. The moment she saw me approaching, she jumped to her feet and clawed at my new university uniform, ripping off a button. You think you're so great now, huh? You got your own brother thrown in jail, she hissed. I gritted my teeth, resisting the urge to pull away. Mom, I'm here to sign the forgiveness statement, I said evenly, holding up my hand so she wouldn't accuse me of fighting back. My father wasn't any better. With zero warning, he landed 2 heavy punches on my back. You're lucky we're even asking you for this. Hurry up and sign, he barked. I took a few steps forward, then turned to face them. Wait, I said. I want to hear you apologize first. My father's face contorted with rage. What did you just say? You're going to university. Your brother is in jail, and you have the gall to demand an apology from us. He lunged to slap me across the face, but before his hand could reach me, an officer twisted his arm behind his back and restrained him. This is a police station, not your home, the officer growled. No apology, then none of you are leaving. At that, my mother panicked. She quickly relented. Fine. I'm sorry, George, my son. We're so sorry. There, I said it. Now let your father go. Makoto hung his head low, too terrified to resist anymore. Big brother. I'm sorry, it was my fault. His voice was weak and trembling. Please let me go. I won't fight you for university ever again. This wasn't just an apology for today. This was an apology I had been waiting for across 2 lifetimes. In my past life, I had slaved away for them, and even after dying of disease, I had never once heard those words. I held back my tears and said hoarsely. Louder. Makoto clenched his fists and, for the first time, truly bowed his head. I really know I was wrong. Big brother, please, I'm begging you. As we left the station, my younger siblings glared daggers at me. Kaito muttered to Maria, just wait. George is an ungrateful traitor. He won't get away with this. Chapter 14. Capital University had finally begun its new semester. For the first time in both of my lives, I felt truly alive. The 1970s Capital University was ahead of its time, filled with bright young minds, progressive ideologies, and an environment that fostered ambition. Each month, the school provided me with 16 yuan in living expenses, along with meal and ration tickets. I was actually living more comfortably than I ever had at home. The professors valued me, protected me. I had finally entered a place where I was appreciated. David, as always, had my back. Big bro, take this money, he said, pressing a handful of cash into my palm outside the school gates. No need to be stingy around your classmates. I tried to refuse, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. I was beyond touched, but just as I was about to thank him, my expression darkened. Maria and Kaito were approaching, dragging a 10-meter-long banner behind them, scrawled in bold red ink. It read, George is a heartless, ungrateful beast unworthy of being human. They hung it right at the university gate. I sucked in a deep breath. Exhaling slowly to calm my rage, I stared them down. What do you two want now? Maria, her arms crossed, sneered, Big brother, you made our parents so angry they fell sick. Shouldn't you give us an explanation? These two were just a high schooler and a middle schooler. Back when I was still in the village, I had been the one working in the fields, earning work points, feeding them, and now, after all that effort, they turned out to be nothing but ungrateful brats, not even as loyal as the stranger I picked up on the roadside. I frowned. Father and mother got sick because of Makoto, not me. You're blaming the wrong person. Maria spat at me. Liar. You might have tricked the school and the police, but you can't fool us. You're nothing but a lazy, selfish, good-for-nothing. You refused to work in the fields, so second brother couldn't get into university. Kaito, the little rat, suddenly lunged at me and bit my arm, sinking his teeth in like a rabid dog. No matter how I tried to shake him off, he wouldn't let go. The school administrators arrived, but they were at a loss about what to do with these two feral children. Onlookers whispered among themselves, why does George's family have so much drama? Yeah, school just started, and there's already been so much trouble. I clenched my fists. The students here mostly came from prestigious backgrounds. My name was already being gossiped about, making me stand out for all the wrong reasons. Just as I was about to grab Kaito by the scruff and pry him off, a group of men in mouse suits and white gloves suddenly stormed in. Without hesitation, they ripped down the banner and tossed it into the trunk of a black car. One of them grabbed Maria by the arm and dragged her toward the vehicle. Maria screamed, thrashing wildly, "Let me go." But the man was built like a tank. No matter how she kicked and flailed, it was pointless. At the same time, another white-gloved man clamped his fingers around Kaito's jaw and forced his mouth open, forcing him to release my arm. With a flick of the wrist, he tossed the boy into the car like a sack of potatoes. And then, stepping gracefully from the car, came Willow. She smiled sweetly, looking proud of herself. "George, I arranged for them to be sent back to the village. Now you can focus on your studies in peace." I stared at her, uncertain how to respond. I didn't want to owe Willow anything. I replied coolly, "No need. Just drop them and my parents at the bus station. I don't want to trouble you." Willow gave me a light, knowing smile. "It's no trouble at all," she said lightly. "Besides, I appreciate you clearing Makoto's charges. If not, I might have been dragged into the mess too." She giggled. "I knew it. George, you still care about me." I turned away, ready to walk off, but Willow suddenly rushed forward and grabbed my sleeve. "Let me take you out for dinner," she said brightly. "My father really admires you. Why don't you come to my house?" I cut her off immediately. "No need. I could never climb up to your level." I publicly rejected her, humiliating her in front of the crowd, but she didn't seem fazed at all. Instead, she smiled and took a step toward me again. "George, don't go. Wait for me." Just as she tried to follow, a hand shot out, blocking her path. David. He stood between us, looking Willow dead in the eye. "Miss Liu," he said flatly, "back then, you played princess, sitting high above while choosing between the Wong brothers like they were entertainment. But now, George wants nothing to do with you. Isn't that only fair?" Willow's face turned red with anger. You. She finally realized that while David wasn't highly educated, he was no fool. Her plan to worm her way back into George's life had failed. She bit her lip, fists clenching at her sides. "I won't give up on him," she declared stubbornly. "George belongs to me." But I didn't look back. I left her standing there, fuming, as I walked toward my new life. Chapter 15. George had long disappeared from sight, but Willow wasn't ready to give up just yet. She still had unfinished business with the Wong siblings. If she could deal with them properly, she might just earn some favor in George's heart. The next day, something unexpected happened. A girl with voluminous curls, dressed in a pale blue cheapao, stepped out of a Volga GAZ car. She moved with an elegant, unshakable poise, not sparing a glance for anyone around her. I murmured under my breath, "Anna." I had known her in my past life. She had once been an official who came to our village for poverty alleviation. I never imagined that in this lifetime, we would become classmates. Her scent lingered faintly in the air as she passed, and I found myself standing there, dazed. I had initially thought she would be approachable. I couldn't have been more wrong. Anna was our class president, sharp, authoritative, and utterly intimidating. Nobody dared to cross her. One day, after skipping half a class to handle some side business, I was caught red-handed. Anna immediately marched up to the lecturer, prepared to report me and dock my credits. I hurriedly pleaded with her. "Sue, can't you let this slide just once? I really had something urgent to do." She rolled her eyes, adjusting her glasses. "What kind of emergency justifies wasting your youth?" she retorted. She was cold and methodical, and I had no argument against her logic. But the problem was, this wasn't something I could avoid. I kept skipping minor classes to run my business. At night, I studied until exhaustion just to keep up. Eventually, I collapsed during gym class. Anna took note of that, and one day, after another one of my absences, she decided to follow me in secret. She tailed me all the way to Xiushui Market. What she saw stunned her. I was sitting on a tricycle with David, riding straight into the bustling marketplace. Our cart was packed with Southern electronics, books, magazines, and clothing. We sold everything. I stood in front of our stall, cheerfully calling out, "Take a look, everyone. A poor student working hard to make ends meet. Have a heart and support me." David, meanwhile, was a master salesman. He could read customers like a book, picking out potential buyers with uncanny precision. He smiled at a well-dressed woman and said, "Miss, a person's taste is reflected in their books. This one suits you perfectly." Our stall was buzzing with activity. It was easily the liveliest one at the market. Anna, watching from the side, finally understood. I wasn't just playing around. I was working to support myself. But considering that Capital University provided generous stipends, she couldn't understand why I was pushing myself this hard. She stormed over to our stall. "George," she yelled, drawing the attention of everyone nearby. I turned around, face stiff. Anna stood there, arms crossed, her presence commanding the entire marketplace. "You've been skipping class just to run a stall. Do you have any shame?" I sighed, defeated. "Sorry, Sue, my family's poor. I didn't have any other choice." She huffed, unimpressed. "Well, at least you admit it. But I am docking your credits." I groaned. I had hoped she might be a little sympathetic. Clearly, I had misjudged her. But then, she paused. "Where do you even get all these products?" she asked, her sharp eyes scanning our goods. "You have a keen eye for market trends." Then, to my shock, she crouched down and started picking out items from our stall. "What are you doing?" I asked, bewildered. "I'm buying some things for my mother and sister," she said casually. I quickly grabbed a stool and offered it to her. "Sue, you should sit." She waved a hand dismissively and continued inspecting our wares. Then, she said something that made my head spin. "You know, running a stall is too time-consuming and too inefficient. You have great products and a good grasp of trends. Instead of selling retail, why don't you start wholesaling?" I had considered this before, but as a mere student, I had no capital and no connections. Plus, private business was still risky in this era. Most people didn't dare to try it. I hesitated. I don't have the startup funds yet." Anna smiled knowingly. "I'll invest in you." David's eyes went wide. He squeezed past me, eagerly saying, "Miss Sue, that's so generous. How could we possibly accept?" Anna chuckled, shaking her head. "You think I'm doing charity?" She casually twirled a finger in the air before laying down her terms. "I take 60% of the profit, and you two split the remaining 40%. I provide the money. You do the work." I hesitated. The ratio wasn't great, but honestly, the hardest part was always the initial capital. This was an opportunity one couldn't afford to pass up. I grinned. "Deal. David and I will head south in a few days to scout the market." Anna held up a hand. "Wait, I have one condition." She folded her arms. "George, you are not allowed to miss a single class. If you do, I'll withdraw my investment immediately." I froze. How was I supposed to balance both? It was impossible. Before I could object, David clapped my shoulder and confidently declared, "No worries, big bro. You just focus on studying. Tell me what products we need. I'll handle the market runs." I felt a wave of warmth wash over me. Since leaving my village, every person I had met had been a blessing. David stuck by me through everything. Anna, in her own unyielding way, was helping me while respecting my pride. That night, I treated Anna to ice cream, and we walked back to campus, chatting more naturally than ever. I had to admit, it was pleasant talking to her, but as soon as we reached the dormitory, I saw a familiar figure desperately questioning my dorm mates. "Do you know which dorm George stays in? Is George here?" It was Willow. Chapter 16. No matter how many times Willow called Capital University looking for me or sent me letters, I never once responded. That woman had falsely accused me in my past life, and in this life, she had drugged me with livestock heat medicine. Did she really think she had any right to keep chasing after me? Without realizing it, I had clenched my fists so tightly that the fabric of my trousers had wrinkled beneath my grip. Anna had doubled back at some point and was now whispering in my ear, "It's dinner time. Let's go to the cafeteria together." At the table, I ate in silence, keeping my head down, focused only on shoveling food into my mouth. Anna suddenly laughed. "George, you're eating the bone I already chewed on." I froze. Damn it. I swallowed awkwardly and apologized immediately. Sorry. Honestly, I felt like I didn't even deserve to eat her leftovers. But before I could regain my composure, "George." Willow's shrill voice cut across the cafeteria like a knife. I instinctively snapped my head around. She was storming toward us, her face red with anger. Then, she jabbed a finger directly at Anna. How can you let him eat your leftover bones? I rubbed my temples, already feeling the headache coming on. I snapped back. Do I owe you an explanation? Willow huffed. Of course you do. Before you went to university, you were my fiancé, and now you're sneaking around with some other woman. Her eyes welled up with tears, acting as if she had been truly wronged. Anna visibly hesitated for a moment before coolly brushing Willow's hand away and saying, I'll leave you two to talk. With that, she turned and walked out of the cafeteria, not wasting another second on the drama. My vision was starting to go red. I had no clue how to even talk to this parasite anymore. I hissed through gritted teeth, Willow, stop spouting nonsense. I swear to the heavens, neither in this life nor the last have I ever been in a relationship with you. If I'm lying, may I die a miserable death. A heavy silence fell over the room. Even Anna, who had been about to leave, paused at the door. Around us, people started whispering, wait, so George isn't dating that girl who's always looking for him? I thought they were together too. Well, that's great news. I still have a shot. Willow's face burned. Seeing how everyone was staring at her, her stubbornness flared again. If you don't care about me, what about your family? She demanded. Makoto is retaking his exams. Your younger siblings have to work in the fields. And your mother cries herself to sleep every night. I'm the one keeping them from causing trouble for you. I frowned. What? I had been sending home 30 yuan a month. That should have been more than enough. I've been sending them money. I said flatly. Why would they need anything from you? Willow folded her arms, looking smug. Oh, money, she sneered. And who's supposed to do the work? Money can't plow fields. She was clearly waiting for my gratitude, expecting me to acknowledge her efforts. Instead, I scoffed. Willow, don't use this to tie me down. From now on, I don't need your help. If Makoto can't farm, then let the fields go barren. If my parents need money, I'll keep sending it. And if they come looking for me, I turned and pointed at the nearby police station. I'll be more than happy to send them right back to jail. The cafeteria erupted in applause. A professor nodded approvingly. Well said. That's how a real man should act. A classmate chimed in. Yeah, using family guilt to pressure him. That's so manipulative. Willow stood frozen, at a complete loss for words. The next 4 years, Willow never stopped chasing me. Eventually, it wasn't just Capital University. Even students from C University and nearby schools knew about her obsession. People started betting on whether she would ever succeed. Somehow, Willow herself began believing the rumors, convinced that this was our love story, that it was just a classic case of a girl chasing a reluctant boy. Meanwhile, life went on. In our graduation photo, Anna stood dead center, stunning compared to everyone else around her. I was at the very edge, yet somehow still stood out. That night, we had our farewell banquet. Everyone drank a little too much. A classmate suddenly grinned at me and said, Hey, George, you've been glued to Anna all 4 years. Are you finally going to marry into her family? Another chimed in. Yeah, marrying her is basically a shortcut to political success. Anna, completely unfazed, simply laughed. Oh, please, stop teasing me. My family's just normal people. We can't afford to have rumors flying around. She said it lightly, but I noticed the way she watched me out of the corner of her eye. I didn't respond. Instead, I raised my glass. To everyone, I said, before downing it in one gulp. I come from a poor background, but I've been fortunate to have your friendship. If you ever need my help in the future, just ask. I truly meant it. I was grateful to all my classmates, but most of all, to Anna. She had supported my education, invested in my business, and protected my dignity every step of the way. Because of her, I was graduating smoothly, had a secured job placement, and had become a successful entrepreneur on the side. In my past life, I could never have dreamed of such good fortune. A rare person is like a rainbow. You only understand their worth when you've seen them. But a rainbow is something you can only admire from afar. It is not something I could reach for. Anna must have sensed it. She looked at me, her eyes dimming slightly. Then, she let out a quiet sigh. Chapter 17. After graduation, everyone went their separate ways. As an outstanding student, I had priority in job selection and joined the mining management office. Anna, on the other hand, chose a position in my superior department. She told me, Old classmate, let me remind you, once you join the office, you can't do any small business on the side anymore. Be careful not to give people something to talk about. I replied. Understood. Thanks for the reminder. Squad leader Sue. She playfully punched my shoulder and said, I'm not your squad leader anymore. I laughed. All right then. After delivering this document to you, I have to rush back to my department and work my tail off. There were plenty of privileged young heirs in our office, but I was the only one who got in through sheer ability. Naturally, I was the one they asked to do everything and answer every question. But when it came to real opportunities to shine, I was never the one chosen. Whenever there were perks to distribute, I always got the worst. Even my desk was placed right next to the restroom, and there was no one to complain to. In my past life, I dug mines. In this life, I was in the upper unit, but I never expected office politics to be just as exhausting as coal mining. Anna saw everything with crystal clarity. She told me, "George, you're too honest and straightforward, and you have no background. You have to keep your temper in check. One day, you'll make it." Her words were like a golden rule to me. I nodded. Got it. On my way back, I kept replaying Anna's expressions and gestures in my mind. She was always radiant, like a guiding star in my life. Yet, I never dared to reach out for her. "Leader, this is Comrade Willow from the neighboring department. She's here to see little Wong." As soon as I stepped into my office, I saw Willow sitting there, like a lingering ghost. She just wouldn't go away. My mood plummeted instantly, but since we were in the workplace, I forced a polite smile. I said, "Comrade Lou, hello." We shook hands, but she held on for far too long. The emotions in Willow's heart were even stronger than before. George, with his crisp haircut and standing collar uniform, exuded an air of authority. He was never meant to remain insignificant. I had to forcefully pull my hand away before she finally let go. Willow said, "Let's go outside to talk." Even though I knew I was stepping into a den of wolves, I had no choice but to follow. I started, "Comrade Lou, about this batch of supplies." Before I could finish my sentence, she suddenly embraced me in the small grove. "George, I miss you so much. You won't even see me once." Back in school, we used to spend so much time together. Startled, I quickly pushed her away, terrified that a coworker might see and misunderstand. "What are you doing? I told you long ago, I don't like you. Why are you so stubborn?" Willow gazed up at me, her confidence only growing. She bit her lip and said, "Don't you realize that in the workplace, you can't move an inch without connections? My father has some influence, he can help you." Back in college, many privileged young men pursued her, but the only one she had her heart set on was George. She continued, "You were the top student, yet now you're dealing with wholesale trade like a street vendor. Do you know how much that breaks my heart? If you marry me, you'll be like a son to my father. You'll never have to worry about not having a place to showcase your talents." I closed my eyes for a moment, then firmly pushed her away. "Enough. Have you said enough? Please stay out of my life. Do I have to call the police to make you stop?" Willow stood frozen in shock. She had thought the offer was irresistible, that I would never refuse. If it were Makoto, he would have already been licking her feet in gratitude. Willow was furious. Ever since she started working, no one had dared to reject her like this. Without thinking, she lunged forward and forcefully kissed me. I was caught off guard. A shiver ran through my entire body. "You're insane. Willow, do you have no shame?" I shoved her away, spitting and wiping my mouth in disgust, but Willow only tightened her grip around my waist, her face filled with a young girl's infatuation. "George, as long as you're in the capital, you'll never escape my grasp." I felt suffocated. I was losing my mind. The next second, a voice rang out. Someone chuckled. Well, George, is this your girlfriend?" A figure suddenly stepped out from behind the trees. It was Martin. This man was sleazy looking but well connected. Once, he tried to approve an illegal deal for a mine, but I stopped him in time. Since then, he had held a grudge against me. I said, "No." Before I could even finish, Willow enthusiastically introduced herself. "Yes, I'm his girlfriend. We've known each other since childhood." Martin, ever the loudmouth, bellowed, "Hey, everyone, come see this." They were making out. Chapter 18. Willow hadn't expected things to turn out like this and immediately panicked. My section chief and director rushed out. The director smirked. "George, you really are popular with the ladies. Yesterday it was Miss Sue. Today it's Miss Lou." The section chief frowned. "Getting involved in workplace romance? What kind of image do you think you're giving off?" Caught red-handed, I could only take the scolding. I said, "I'm sorry, it was my fault." Only then did Willow realize she had caused trouble again. But unlike with me, she had no patience for them. She scoffed. "Fault? Do you even know who my father is? You'd better show George some respect." That really set me off. I was a man. If I needed a woman to speak up for me, what dignity would I have left in the office? I barked, "Willow, get lost." Willow was stunned. She was trying to help me, so why was I lashing out at her? She asked in disbelief, "Who do you think you're talking to?" The surrounding leaders were also taken aback. They knew Miss Lou had powerful connections, but they never expected me to be able to put her in her place. I repeated myself, yelling, "I told you to get the hell out. Are you deaf?" Willow, furious and on the verge of tears, stormed into her car. She had half expected me to stop her, but when she turned around, I had already disappeared. Sitting in the car, she kept replaying the incident in her head, and then a sudden thought struck her. Who was this Miss Sue? She ordered, "Tom, investigate if there's a woman named Sue around George." After a long search, her driver finally gave a conclusion. Back in university, George's class monitor was named Anna Sue. She's someone we can't afford to mess with. Willow frowned. Can't afford to mess with. She wasn't convinced. Then, she remembered. She had once had a meal with Anna and George during university. It was hard to believe there was anyone out there she couldn't touch. But no matter how powerful Anna was, she hadn't done anything to help George. It was Willow who was actually doing something for him. She was the one who had the right to be his girlfriend. She instructed, contact George's superior. Give him a little nudge. After all, George was just a commoner. No matter how smart he was, he didn't understand the art of networking. Only when he started receiving tangible benefits would he realize the importance of having the right people around. A few days later, my desk was suddenly moved away from its spot near the restroom. My boss even started acting a little more deferential toward me. I went from being swamped with work to having nothing to do, sitting idly all day long. Just as I was feeling suspicious, Martin slid into the seat beside me in the cafeteria, carrying his meal tray. He sneered, "George, enjoying your sugar mommy's favors?" I was baffled. "What the hell are you talking about?" In the next second, Martin flipped my tray onto the table, spilling food all over me. Clenching his teeth, he growled, "Don't play dumb with me. I'm doing all your work now, all because your dear Miss Lou pulled some strings for you." My face burned with rage. I snapped, "What the hell are you talking about? What does she have to do with this?" Martin let out a mocking laugh. "Oh, come on with your looks. It's a waste for you to just be a freeloader. You'd make a perfect kept boy." That was it. I had reached my breaking point. I threw a punch, roaring, "Screw you." One punch after another. I vented every bit of frustration that had been bottled up inside me, but I knew exactly what I was doing. I had lived 2 lives. I wasn't someone ruled by impulse. My ambitions and ideals had nothing to do with this job. In fact, I felt completely suffocated by it, manipulated like a puppet on strings, unable to breathe. If I couldn't break free, I might as well walk away. By the time I was done, Martin couldn't even get up. I went straight to my superior's office and handed in my resignation. The leader looked troubled. "I'm afraid Miss Lou won't agree to this." I scoffed. "I don't care what she agrees to." "What? Is she going to hold me here by force?" Walking out of that office, I had never felt better. With my Zhongshan suit draped over my shoulders, I tilted my head back and gazed at the deep blue sky. David was waiting for me at the entrance, leaning against his beat-up van. He whistled when he saw me. I clapped him on the shoulder. "Let's go have a drink. I'm officially unemployed now." David sighed. "Brother, you were meant for greater things." I shook my head. "I was always meant to go into business. I just spent 2 extra years in school. I had once dreamed of changing the world, of going back to my hometown and doing something big, proving to my parents that they had underestimated me. But reality had other plans. In this world, I couldn't escape office politics or social games. All I really wanted was for Willow to leave me alone, nothing more." The van rattled as it started up, the cargo in the back clanking noisily. I said, "David, trust me, anyone who jumps into business now, even a pig, will be making money in a few years." Before I even finished my sentence, a Volga GAZ pulled up in front of us. Anna stepped out, her trench coat billowed like a banner in the wind, her hair flowing like a painting. She looked at me and said, "Where do you think you're going?" "I'm holding onto your resignation for now. Don't do anything stupid." Chapter 19. Anna had always been meticulous in her work. As someone from my superior unit, she naturally saw my resignation notice. A job in this kind of workplace was an iron rice bowl. In the early 1980s, only an idiot would quit. She knew I had been constantly suppressed, but who hadn't gone through this kind of trial. She thought this was a great opportunity for me to toughen up. I usually seem to have a broad perspective, so why was I being so impulsive now? I said, "Squad leader Sue, you don't need to say anything. I'm very clear-headed. I'm not someone who plays political games, and I refuse to accept certain unwritten rules. What truly suits me is working for myself." Hearing this, Anna's furrowed brows smoothed out. She knew she hadn't misjudged me. Every step George took seemed calculated. He never needed anyone to arrange his path for him. That fool Willow, she had ruined his future. He would probably never forgive her for it. Anna nodded. "All right, since you've thought this through. You're going drinking, right? Count me in." I hesitated. Of course, I wanted to spend more time with Anna, but she was a lady of privilege. Was it really appropriate? David, however, was utterly shameless and said, let's go, my treat." With that, he pulled open the van door. I nearly popped my eyes out. Was he insane, letting Anna ride in a rundown van, and in the back, with the cargo? Was he treating her like freight? Anna was silent for nearly 10 seconds. Even my driver tilted his head at the scene, his expression dark as coal. Helpless, I resigned myself to sitting in the back. I spread a magazine over the passenger seat and said, "Sit in the front." Anna gave a small, effortless smile. "All right, We rattled our way to a state-run restaurant. David went all out, treating us to a good meal. Anna, being the only daughter of a military family, could handle her liquor well. In no time, she had both David and me drinking ourselves under the table. She was tipsy too, and under the influence of alcohol, while David was passed out. She leaned in and kissed me. I froze, turning to look at Anna. I didn't know what to say. How could I possibly deserve this? I wasn't oblivious to the fact that Anna saw me differently, but how could I ever live up to that? Anna rolled her eyes and teased, "George, you're such a coward." Through my hazy drunkenness, I stared at her. She looked so beautiful. I didn't even dare to look directly at her. I parted my lips slightly, then hesitated and pulled back. I said, "Give me 5 years. If I kiss you now, that would truly make me a coward." 5 years was too short. Maybe I'd never be able to stand beside her as an equal. To my surprise, Anna shot me a glare and said, "I'm not waiting. Give me an answer now." Suddenly, the door to the private room slammed open. Someone barged in, screaming hysterically, "George, are you insane? I went through so much effort to pave the way for you, and you ruined it all by getting into a fight." Willow. But the next second, she caught sight of the lipstick stain on my face. She froze for a moment, then shrieked, "You too, you're fooling around here." That word again. It had ruined my past life. It had almost ruined this one, and Willow still wasn't done. I snapped, "If you have something to say it to me. What does Anna have to do with this? Do you just love ruining people's reputations?" I was anxious. What if Anna misunderstood? Willow was nearly choking in frustration. She couldn't understand why, after chasing George from the countryside to the city for so many years, he was still indifferent to her, and now, he was defending another woman right in front of her. Anna tilted her lips into a smirk. "Enough. You two clearly can't communicate. George, wait outside. This is a conversation between women." And just like that, I was pushed out. Inside, only Anna and Willow remained. Willow felt strangely uneasy. When George had been in the room, she could yell and jump around all she wanted. But now, Anna just sat there, one leg crossed over the other, arms folded, exuding an air of overwhelming authority. It made her hesitant to speak. Anna didn't bother with small talk. She got straight to the point. "Willow, what will it take for you to leave George alone?" Willow's voice sharpened, her expression incredulous. "Leave him alone?" She scoffed. "I'm trying to make it up to him. Back then, because of me, he was used by others and nearly couldn't get into university." Anna nodded. "I know about that. But if you want to make it up to him, shouldn't he have a say in whether he wants it or not?" "Willow, when you were sent to the countryside, didn't you learn how to keep your head down? And now that you're in the capital, with a little power, you've forgotten." That struck a nerve. Those years had been the most humiliating of Willow's life, ones she would rather erase from memory. She frowned. "Anna, you seem to know a lot about me." Anna took a bite of her food and said, "Of course, if I want a man, I make sure I know his history." Willow wasn't convinced. She sneered. "Then what makes you any different from me? You're just as high and mighty. What are you pretending for?" Anna responded smoothly, not even skipping a beat. "The difference is, I only want to understand him. You want to control him. To you, he's just some country boy. You think being interested in him is already a favor. But I respect his choices, recognize his talents, and am willing to wait for him to grow into someone who can stand beside me as an equal." Willow's face twisted. She was completely at a loss for words. Outside, I heard everything. If a woman like Anna couldn't move my heart, I couldn't imagine anyone else ever would. I watched as Willow flung the curtain aside and fled. Anna, on the other hand, walked out slowly, glancing at me with a knowing look. She had settled the matter with Willow, but as for what I owed Anna, she still hadn't gotten her answer. Chapter 20. I didn't want to keep avoiding it anymore. I looked Anna in the eye and said with complete sincerity, "Give me 3 years to build my business. Anna, I won't let you down." I stretched out my hand in front of her. Anna smiled and playfully slapped my palm. She nodded. "All right, it's a deal." Meanwhile, Willow tossed and turned all night, unable to sleep. The more she thought about it, the more furious she became. Why did George treat her like a piece of clingy tape that he couldn't wait to tear off? And why was he so scared of Anna, thinking there was something between them? What made Anna so much better than her? She was even more arrogant than she was. At least she had been actually helping George, but he refused to appreciate it. Anna, on the other hand, only had to say a few smooth words, and suddenly, he was ready to dedicate his life to her. Ring, ring, ring. The phone suddenly rang. When she picked up, she realized it was Makoto, calling from a public phone. On the other end, his voice was full of grievance. "Willow, why haven't you written to me in so long? I go to the village entrance every day, hoping to see a letter from you." Hearing his voice instantly annoyed her. She snapped, "If you're wasting time at the village entrance, then who's out harvesting? It's the busiest season. Why are you slacking off?" Makoto sounded even more pitiful. Do I have to live my whole life for them? Secretary Mao told me all about it. My brother got into the mining bureau. And here I am stuck with nothing. Pathetic. The poorer a person was, the more they clung to resentment. His mindset had become utterly stagnant. Willow had no patience for this nonsense. The two brothers were as different as heaven and earth. She replied coldly, and what does that have to do with me? You're a failure because you chose to be one. Who else can you blame? Makoto's voice suddenly turned nasty, full of resentment. Willow, my mother always said, if only you had told everyone my brother was a thug back then, I could have gotten into Capital University and gotten a stable job. We could have been married by now. Willow burst into laughter, as if she had just heard the joke of the century. This is my fault. Your mother is just as twisted as you. Be grateful I never reported either of you. Makoto, now completely shameless, said, if you don't help me, I'll come to the capital and make a scene. That was the problem with desperate people, no fear, no consequences. Willow knew she couldn't afford to provoke someone like him, but then, an idea popped into her mind. She said sweetly, all right, I'll take you to your brother. Let your mother talk some sense into him and convince him not to throw away his future. So many years had passed, surely George wasn't still angry at his family. If she could reunite them, George would have to be grateful to her, and maybe then, he would finally marry her. A few days later, I officially finalized my resignation and was about to leave for the South with David. Anna came specifically to see me off. She said, don't forget, when you need investors, count me in. I'll buy a share. I understood. Anna was worried I'd run into financial trouble and struggle to get by. The thought of it filled me with indescribable gratitude. If liking someone was what Willow did, relentless, manipulative, unwilling to give up, then loving someone was what Anna did. She let me run free and only wished for me to soar. I smiled. All right, if I ever need funding, I won't hesitate to ask you, but we both knew I never would. I was determined to make something of myself, to build a future where I could stand shoulder to shoulder with Anna, as an equal, and so, I left, quietly. Anna struggled to adjust to life without me. Back in school, she used to chase after me when I skipped class. Later, when I started doing business, she would receive her share of the profits from me, watching me grin as I counted the bills. She had seen me secretly watching her from behind and had even found the many sketches I had drawn of her, though I had always assumed she never noticed. But that was what made George so intoxicating. And yet, just as Anna turned around, she saw Willow standing at the door of my rented apartment, dragging my entire family behind her. Wang's mother called out, George, it's your mother. Come out and see me. Wang's father, his face full of anger, spat, humph, that ungrateful brat. After all these years, all he's done is send us a bit of lousy money. Who cares about that? They banged on the door repeatedly, but there was no response. Makoto kept circling Willow like an annoying fly. Are you sure my brother lives here? You're not lying to us, are you? Willow, rolling her eyes in disgust, replied, of course. He's on suspension today. If he's not home, where else would he be? She glanced at Makoto in disdain, wishing she could get as far away from him as possible. After years of working on the farm, Makoto had turned dark-skinned, rough, and prematurely aged. Willow wondered what on earth she had been thinking back then. How had she ever compared him to George? She shouted toward the door, George, open up. Look who's here. Your parents have missed you so much. She kept knocking, but still, there was no sound from inside. Then, suddenly, a cold voice cut through the air. He's gone. Willow stiffened. Only now did she realize that Anna had been watching the whole time. Willow turned to her and asked, what are you doing here? Where did George go? Anna stood tall, her high heels making her tower over Willow. She said, didn't you drive him away? What man can endure being called a freeloader? Willow refused to believe it. That's nonsense. Why would he throw away such a great future? In Willow's world, she couldn't comprehend the idea of George choosing his own path instead of clinging to security. Anna had said enough. She turned on her heels and walked away. Willow stood frozen, left behind with the raging Wang family. Makoto's voice was sharp. Did you really force my brother to leave? Wang's mother snapped. Don't talk nonsense. My son George was the top scholar, and he had a government job. Why would he ever be a freeloader? Willow, explain yourself. Willow had brought the Wang family here hoping to bind George to her. Instead, she had driven him away, and now, she had lit the fire under herself. She had to deal with this mess alone. Her face twisted with anger as she watched Anna walk away. This wasn't over. She ran after Anna, shouting, where did you take him? Bring him back. She grabbed at Anna's car door, refusing to let her leave. Chapter 21. Anna ordered her driver without hesitation. Drive. The driver didn't hesitate either. He slammed on the gas. The sleek Volga GAZ shot forward like an arrow, dragging Willow along for over 10 meters before she was forced to let go. It had rained the night before. The ground was muddy. By the time she finally let go, her chin, elbows, and knees were scraped raw, covered in blood mixed with dirt. Ah, she wailed in pain, her cries echoing through the street. All she had wanted was to help George, to show him how much she loved him, but instead, it had backfired completely. George was as stubborn as a mule, impossible to pull back, and now, he probably never wanted to see her again. She collapsed onto the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. "George, where are you?" Makoto shuffled closer, grinning. "Stop crying, Willow. If my brother doesn't want you, I do." He pulled her into his arms, his expression filled with greed, but Willow felt nothing but disgust. He clung to her like a parasite. She shoved him away violently. "Let go of me. Even if George doesn't want me, I'll wait for him to come back. Makoto, I have never liked you." Makoto fell into the mud, wailing like a child. "You said you liked me. How can you be so heartless? Why is it that every good thing in life falls into my brother's lap?" The more he cried, the louder he got. People around them started staring at Willow. She had a reputation. How could she stand being humiliated like this? She scowled. "Enough. Stop crying. I will find your brother, but I will always be your sister-in-law. Stop fantasizing about me." That comment set Wang's mother off. She snapped. "How dare you talk like that? What's wrong with my second son? Just because he didn't go to college, you think you're too good for him? You've already ruined my eldest son's future, and now my second son is so lovesick he can't even think straight. You're a witch." Maria pointed a finger at her. "That's right, a witch. A vixen. Come see the vixen seducing men." Kaito clapped his hands and cheered, encouraging the crowd to gather. Willow clenched her fists. Why hadn't she realized before how unreasonable this family was? She regretted everything. She snapped. "Enough. If you keep shouting, I'll make sure you never find George again." That shut them up instantly. George was the only capable person in the Wang family. If it weren't for the money he sent back over the years, they wouldn't have been able to survive. They didn't dare push Willow too far. Instead, they slinked away, returning to the village to wait for news. But Willow wasn't done. She pulled some strings and eventually tracked down David's van. It had gone south. George was really starting a business. What an idiot. No business could ever compare to a stable government job. Willow followed. It took over a month of searching, but she finally found George's factory. She had dressed elegantly, carrying an exquisite fruit basket and George's favorite rice candy, hoping to reignite old memories. Back then, she had leaned on his shoulder, nibbling on pesticide-free fruit, watching the stars by the haystacks. Now, I was running a small factory, buying and assembling radio and television parts for resale. The place was a mess, dark, damp, and crawling with roaches and rats. Willow hesitated at the entrance, frowning at the filth beneath her feet. I put down my welding mask, rubbing my temple. "Willow, what are you doing here?" She stood at the door, full of disdain, but forced a smile and said, "I came to take you home. My father arranged a better position for you, better than what you had before." I sighed. "Why don't you understand? I want freedom. Why won't you let me go?" She pouted. "But, your life here is unstable. Your family is worried about you." Some of the workers, former prisoners on parole, started jeering. "Boss, you're lucky. A beauty came all this way just for you." I shot them a glare, and they immediately shut up. Then, I felt something, a bad feeling. I instinctively turned toward the entrance. Sure enough, Makoto and my mother had arrived. Makoto looked hesitant. "Big brother, why didn't you contact us?" My mother, on the other hand, wasn't hesitant at all. She scowled. "George, what is all this nonsense? The money you've sent back the past 2 months is nowhere near as much as when you had your government job." I clenched my forehead. My head felt like it was about to explode. I gritted my teeth. Willow. Chapter 22. I snatched the fruit basket and rice candy from Willow's hands and hurled them against the farthest wall. The fruit smashed into pulp, the rice candy scattered like snow, dirtying the entire floor. And I didn't stop there. I swept all the radios off my desk and sent them crashing to the ground. My mother gasped. "What are you doing? Is this how you treat your own mother?" Makoto chimed in immediately. "That's right, brother. You can't forget where you came from. You stole my university spot. How can you abandon me?" That was it. Those words lit a fire inside me. I grabbed Makoto by the collar and started swinging. Fist after fist, I rained blows on him, snarling, "Forget where I came from. You've spent years lazing around at home. You think I don't know? This entire family has been living off me, and now you dare come here to insult me." Each punch landed with bone-crunching force. My mother desperately tried to pull me off. No one had ever seen me this furious before. Even the former convicts in my factory, men who had seen real violence, stood frozen in shock. David sprinted over and yanked me back. He pointed at Willow and cursed. "Miss Liu, if you knew anything about my big brother, you'd know his family is his biggest trigger. He never wanted to see them again." And you brought them straight to his door. I don't know if you love him or just want to ruin his life. Willow, who had never been scolded by someone beneath her status, felt her face burn with humiliation. She clenched her fists, her voice trembling. Fine, fine, I'm always wrong. No matter what I do, it's wrong. I shamelessly begged my father to arrange a job for you. That was wrong. I reunited you with your family. That was wrong. Everything is my fault, isn't it? She ran off, tears streaming down her face, unable to understand why she was so insignificant in George's eyes. Willow had always gotten whatever she wanted. Back when she was forced to the countryside, she had ignored George's sincerity, thinking she was temporarily in the depths before rising again. But now, George wasn't even asking for anything from her, he simply didn't want her at all. She wiped her tears away. George, you refuse a peaceful option, so you'll take the hard way instead. She turned to her driver. Uncle Tom, find a way to report him. Get his factory shut down, if we have to. We'll tie him up and force him back to work. They gathered local enforcers, arriving with official seals and even a group of men carrying ropes, 10 bodyguards in total. Willow gave her orders. When you get inside, seize him immediately. Make it clean. But when they got there, they hit a dead end. The factory's iron gate was shut. Willow pounded on it furiously. George, stop hiding from me. She was so enraged she wanted to tear the entire place down. Break it open, she screamed. The men hacked at the gate with axes, drawing a crowd from the neighboring businesses. But when they finally got inside, the factory was empty. George was gone. Willow refused to accept it. She turned to Uncle Tom. I don't care where he's gone. Search the entire country if you have to. But the driver hesitated, his face dark. Miss, he said cautiously, I'm a man. I understand Wong. He's running because he's afraid you'll bring his family after him again. If you keep pushing him, he's just going to resent you more. Uncle Tom had served Willow's father for years. He was experienced, a man whose words carried weight. Willow felt her heart tighten. Am I really pushing him too hard? Uncle Tom, I just want to see him every day. I want to be with him. Uncle Tom shook his head. He doesn't need anyone with him. A falcon has to fly. The more freedom you give him, the more he'll respect you. She understood. She understood all too well. These weren't just Uncle Tom's words. This was a message from her father. She knew she should stop, but some things felt written in her fate, impossible to change. I felt the same way. I couldn't shake the memory of Willow's promise in my past life. She had said she would repay me in our next life, but instead, she had become a shackle around my neck. She wasn't giving me fortune, she was dragging me down. A cursed bond. No more. I shut it all out. I threw myself into making money. Part of it was chasing my past dreams. The other part was keeping my promise to Anna. By then, I had saved up a substantial amount. I started stockpiling textiles, preparing to move them at the right moment. Sugar was another scarce commodity, so I bought it near state factories and even started cross-border trading. Simply put, I sold whatever was in demand. And David, he was a marketing genius. He even introduced lottery sales, making our business explode. People accused us of speculation, of disrupting the system. Many couldn't accept this bold new approach. But I wasn't just a businessman, I had a pen. I wrote a letter directly to the city officials. I argued that we were revitalizing the national economy, aligning with state policies, and following the tide of the times. This was the future, and it worked. The city leaders personally visited my factory. After their inspection, they gave me the green light to continue my operations unrestricted. That was the moment I knew I had won. I decided to take a bigger gamble. That year, I took over a coal mine. In an era of infrastructure expansion, nothing was in greater demand. The paperwork was finalized. The first thing I did, I called Anna. Chapter 23. 2 years had passed. I had been running around non-stop, getting involved in every profitable venture I could find, standing at the forefront of the times. I was a true pioneer of the 1980s. Anna was genuinely happy for me. Meanwhile, she had been promoted twice. Her future was limitless. She said, "Congratulations, Director Wong. On behalf of all our fellow mining students, I extend my sincere congratulations." Hearing her speak so formally made me feel strangely warm inside. I asked, "And what about you? Personally, don't you have anything else to say?" Anna laughed for a long moment before finally replying, "Very well. On behalf of myself, I express my admiration and regard for you." Though her words were upright and proper, they were sweeter to me than honey. I said, "Anna, I love you. One day, I'll bring mountains of gold and silver to your family and formally ask for your hand." Anna gave a soft hum of agreement. She said, "My father has heard of you. He says you have integrity, vision, and the courage to act, a man with real potential." I chuckled. "Is that so? Your father is truly perceptive." But as I sighed, I couldn't help but think of my own family, a complete disaster. I feared that one day, my past would taint my future with Anna, and as fate would have it, Whatever you fear most always comes knocking. Just as my mining business was getting on track, my secretary walked into my office. Sir, your family is here. The mine was only a few dozen miles from my hometown, the very same place where, in my past life, I had been a lowly miner. Now, the land belonged to me. Recently, I had been building schools and welfare homes in town. My reputation was growing. I had paved 30% of the roads in our district. And now, my mother had followed those roads straight to my doorstep. I felt my face go cold. I'm not seeing them, but I had underestimated my mother's persistence. I soon heard her shrieking. Who dares stop me? I'm George's mother. She screamed and rolled on the ground until she finally forced her way into my office. The moment I saw her, I was stunned. She was only in her early 50s, yet she looked older than she had in my past life at 60. Her hair was almost completely white, and she was bent over, as if her back could no longer straighten. Even in my last life, when I had worked myself to death to care for them, I had never seen her like this. I asked, "What happened to you? What kind of work have you been doing? Haven't I sent enough money for you to hire help?" Without hesitation, she threw herself into my arms, sobbing, "Oh, my son, you don't know how much I've suffered. Why haven't you come to see me?" Then she told me everything. Makoto had gambled away all the money I sent home. Some local thugs had lured him to the gambling table. When he lost, he used my father's city apartment as collateral. Now, my younger sister had no home to move into for her marriage. No one was left to tend the family's land. So my mother had been forced to swing the hoe herself. I never expected this. In this life, since Makoto hadn't gone to university, he had turned into a gambler instead. In my past life, he had leeched off me. In this one, he leeched off our parents. She sobbed. George, I regret everything. I can't believe I was so blind. I never saw that Makoto was a heartless wretch. I had been waiting for this moment. I had worked so hard just to hear these words. In my past life, I had given everything for my parents, only to die never hearing a single word of gratitude. Parents always favor the child who isn't around. But now, even after hearing her apology, I felt no satisfaction. I said, "Then I'll round up some men, smash that gambling den, and drag Makoto back to farm the land. That way, he can properly take care of you." I turned to my men. "Go, bring him back. Beat him until he learns his lesson. If he gambles again, break his fingers." But before my men could move, my mother stumbled forward, blocking their way. "No, no, no. He knows he was wrong. He's soft, he won't survive a beating." She clung to my sleeve and pleaded, "I don't mean anything else. Son, he just owes a few thousand yuan. Do you have anything in your account? Give me some money, and I'll pay off his debts." Chapter 24. I stared at my mother, a sharp, suffocating pain tightening in my chest. Even now, she was still indulging Makoto, trying to use my money to fill his bottomless pit of debt. I asked, "Mom, what did you just say? If we pay off his debts now, how the hell is he supposed to learn his lesson?" My mother pounded her chest twice, the thudding sound echoing through the room. She wailed, "Oh, it's all my fault. I didn't raise him right. But he's your younger brother. You two grew up wearing the same pair of pants. Can you really bear to hurt him?" I laughed coldly. "Yes, I can. Let's go. I'll personally go get him. I'd like to see just how sturdy his bones are." My mother's face twisted in shock. Her little guilt trip had completely failed. She was out of tricks. After all, she had only just come crawling back to recognize me as her son. She was already grateful that I wasn't bringing up how she had drugged me back then. How could she dare to act tough now? At the gambling den, I stormed in with my men and flipped every damn table. I dragged Makoto out, his face swollen and bruised from a prior beating. "You little bastard," I spat, yanking him up by his collar. "You had perfectly good land to farm, and instead, you're out here gambling." One of the gambling hall lackeys stepped forward to block me. "Who do you think you are? Do you even know who runs things around here?" I shoved him aside without hesitation. "Who runs things?" I kicked over a stool, my voice ice cold. "All of you, come take a trip to the police station with me." Someone muttered in the background. "That's Makoto's older brother. That's George." The gangster's bravado wavered slightly, but one of them still sneered. "So what if he runs a mine? If he sends us to jail, his own brother is going down too. We're all tied to the same boat. What's there to be afraid of?" One of the local thugs smirked smugly, thinking he had me in a bind. Then my mother stepped in to mediate, her voice full of fake laughter. Right. Let's not make a scene. My eldest son has money, plenty of money." I didn't hesitate. "Call the police. Makoto still has a chance if he gets locked up for a couple of years. If we don't stop him now, his gambling addiction will ruin him forever." The room froze. Everyone's expressions changed. They could tell I wasn't bluffing. I was dead serious. My mother panicked and threw herself in front of me. No, you can't do this. George, you'll ruin his life." She clutched at the sleeves of my men, trying to stop them from making the call. but I acted as if I couldn't hear her. I shot my men a look, and they immediately headed for the police station. Then, suddenly, my mother dropped to her knees. I stood there, stunned. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "George, son. I know I've wronged you, and I know it's my fault that your brother turned out like this, but please, please don't send him to prison." That cut deep. For so long, we hadn't seen each other, and now, the very first time we reunited, my own mother was kneeling before me. The pain in my chest felt sharper than swallowing glass. I exhaled slowly. "Stand up. I'm not changing my mind." Just then, the shouting outside grew louder. My father had arrived. He barged in, his voice booming with authority. "Anyone who tries to send my son to prison will have to step over my dead body." His sharp gaze fell on me. "George, your brother was a premature baby. He was as small as a kitten when he was born. We struggled so hard to raise him, and now you want to throw him in jail. You disappeared for years, made your fortune, and now you can't even pay off his debt. If you don't, then we don't need a son like you." It was always the same. My parents never made sense. And Makoto? He sat on the floor, looking completely fearless. He smirked, his voice dripping with mockery. "Dad, Mom, don't beg him. He doesn't care about me. He's just waiting for me to die." My fists clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. Every single person in this room was twisting the truth. It was like they had all agreed that I was the one in the wrong. I finally understood. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about power. They controlled me through my kindness and my love. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, Willow stormed in. I was already at my breaking point. Seeing her just made everything worse. What? Was she trying to interfere with my family now too? But the moment she opened her mouth,